You're in a place, a room filled with people chatting about anything and everything. You have a homemade bomb on you. Whatever happens, you will place the bomb. If you change your mind or have any doubts, don't think you will be able to run away with it. The bomb will explode anyway, so you better place it according to the plan. When you get to the club, you will see a crowd of civilians, people innocently dancing and chatting. Don't think they are innocent. No one is really innocent. Whoever denies oppression is not innocent. They are complicit in that oppression. Don't let your emotions take over. Leave the bomb under the bar as planned. Remember, it is not a fair war, and you are no longer a civilian. You stopped being a civilian when you saw people dying. Later on, when you will be interrogated, you will answer, I am not a civilian. I was asked to acknowledge that my act was a dark stain in the history of the revolution. Did they expect a white revolution? Is a revolution supposed to be stainless? I wonder. A revolution is not a virgin, but if it stops being a virgin, they start hating it. There is no pure revolution to satisfy your fantasy, my dear. The revolution is not a virgin. It is dirty and bloody. Those are Jamila's words. They are taken from a script where I will play her part. Jamila is Jamila Bouhairid, the famous Algerian freedom fighter. A new film inspired by La Bataille d'Alger and her infamous trial is now being produced. I was given the role since the actress who had made it to the second casting round eventually refused it. She said she had a moral issue with it. Her decision stirred a big public discussion that I will come back to later. But at some point, in the midst of a heated argument with the director, she screamed, "Can't you see that this Jamila is a criminal and nothing more?" She then left the room, slamming the door behind her. She was on the verge of tears. Why was she that stubborn about not playing Jamila's role? Why did the role affect her that much? She must have had a serious and personal reason to refuse. Or perhaps she saw in Jamila's character a certain monstrosity that could have compromised her self-image or the image she wanted to convey as an actor. A ruthless woman who can plant bombs with no regret. While we, the other actors in the casting, wanted to play what we considered to be a heroic role, two different perspectives. Jamila was a heroine for us and a criminal for her. The actor who was reluctant to play the role didn't want to compromise herself with Jamila's bloody story. She was convinced that a monster always hid behind a seductive female icon. Never trust beautiful icons. My encounter with that beautiful icon was a coincidence. It began with an image I once saw. I was taking part in a workshop with Emery Douglas, the graphic designer and illustrator of the Black Panther Party. It ended up not being a very productive workshop, as we mainly listened to stories Douglas kept repeating about the old days. Nevertheless, it was nice to hear those stories spoken by the icon himself, or rather, a creator of icons himself. Douglas's words became history, and he keeps repeating those same words so that history remains unchanged. For the workshop, I researched drawn and painted portraiture of political figures, like sign paintings. I asked a friend who was part of a radical leftist group at the end of the 90s if he could help me. Back then, he and his group wanted to reconstitute the Communist Party, a crazy idea at a time when the Communist Party was at its weakest. I knew they used to publish a monthly newspaper with drawings and paintings. I thought he would know about the subject, and in fact he did. But it wasn't the group's newspaper that he showed me. Rather, he showed me a pile of old magazines his grandpa had left him. Big piles of yellow paper stacked in 3 huge cardboard boxes. I found myself in front of some amazingly seductive material from Egypt dating from the 50s and 60s, and dust. As soon as I started browsing through the magazines, I forgot about portraiture. I was drawn to the magazine's article, which sounded, for the most part, quite funny and naive. I could rarely finish reading an article. I quickly got bored. But the titles and the introductions made use of seductive language and luring questions. They never failed to catch my attention, but always ended disappointing me and boring me when they resolved into some kind of moralistic answer or a straightforward practical solution with an underlying morality, a how-to loaded with implicit authoritarianism. This is how you should do it. As a general tone, the magazine preached rather criticality, but I would soon discover that this was just a nice package in the ways of a soft dictatorship. It obviously addressed educated conservative readers and had to please them. It had to please the middle class. How to become a better wife? Or should women fight? Yes, the focus on women was prominent. The word woman kept recurring throughout different issues, expressing a fascination with what women can do and with what they can't do. It sounded like women were stepping into public life for the first time in history, and this needed some moral regulations, pleasing the readers, but also controlling their sense of morality. If we think that the magazine was nationalized during Nasser's regime, it was printed in 50s, 60s Egypt, it becomes obvious that a lot was left unsaid or simply cut out. To some extent, the magazine represented the discourse of the official state ideology violently with a soft language. How to achieve socialism? This necessitated a few practical steps. Actually, these two words often came together, women and socialism, but not only. Women, socialism, Arabs, fascination for monkeys, technology and the moon. The proliferation of new inventions and the fascination with modern technologies seemed to compensate for lost time, as if the Egyptian regime felt behind the rest of the world and needed to catch up. This was right after the British had left Egypt. Indeed, there was a need to compensate for years of colonization. Progress was perceived as sequential stages, like a school system where you went from one grade to the next. First you manufacture a bicycle, then a car, then a helicopter, and then a plane. And if you're particularly gifted, you could reach the moon one day. All the terminologies for technological inventions were newly translated, and I wondered if people had difficulties in pronouncing them. I guess that when the new words are introduced, the tongue needs time to adapt. Most of the socialist terminology were freshly translated as well, but had to be pronounced instantly and rapidly. How can we achieve an Arab socialism, or how can we achieve an Arab socialism? On paper. All these ambitious projects and seductive words are still on paper, yet to be realized in the past tense. I read the titles only. I enjoyed reciting them and tried to count how often the word woman came up in one issue. Why do women get angry? Can women forgive? Long live the masculine woman. Women and mirrors. Women from the West. Respect women's freedom. I blame women. Who lies more, women or man? A woman who is not a woman. Women and capitalism. Women and socialism. Women and should women fight? or counting how many times the word socialism was used in one text. I was trying to find fun ways of reading until I discovered those two issues. Suddenly, it all became more serious. I was mesmerized by the drawings on the covers. It took me back to my initial search for drone portraiture, but not only. These images of women carrying guns really stood out compared to the rest of the covers showing beautiful, poised ladies. Those two covers were also beautiful. They were pointing their guns at the readers. Yes, they were looking back at the readers with their guns loaded. The question, should women fight, that accompanied the image was answered on the inside. If she is courageous and has enough guts, she should fight. Were they referring to the woman on the cover of the magazine with the headline, "A woman who is not a woman," or to the one stating, "Long live the masculine women"? It was simple. They needed fighters, and yes, she should definitely take arms. But were there only 2 cases of courageousness amidst more than 200 issues? Were the rest just uncourageous women languidly posing on brightly colored covers? I held these 2 magazines and pointed them at the rest of the pile. I was hoping that the other covers would react by taking arms or hiding or doing something. But this would have demanded extensive animation work. And why did I want them to take up arms anyway? I never had the ambition of forming an armed group. Or was it a deeply hidden fantasy of mine? Did I want to be on that magazine cover instead of her? I even tried sticking my head on the cover. But it didn't work. So I tried to wear it. This was not working either. I decided to open the magazine and search for a practical solution to my problem. All I could find were exalted tributes to the brave Algerian fighters, as if saying, to those women who are thinking of taking up arms and joining the Algerian colonial struggle, you will be praised and raised to the level of your beloved heroes if you do so. They were everywhere, the brave Algerian fighters. This is when I saw Jamila for the first time. Call it love at first sight. Me. I will play your role soon. Jamila. Don't tell me another one of those movies. Me. I will try to say something new. Say that I died. Oh, don't say that. Why did I picture you holding your gun in this way? Why are you so fascinated by guns anyway? I am fascinated by your gun. You are fascinated by the painting on that cover. In a way, the magazine had created a category called woman, who was asked to hold up her gun to whoever looked her way. They, the women on the covers, became guardians of that category called woman, the guardians of the soft dictatorship, the revolutionary dictatorship. They pointed their guns at the people walking along the street, going to work, looking at the bookshelves and admiring these seductive covers. My friend told me he almost felt relieved when he discovered his grandfather's magazine in the 1990 in the wake of the dismantling of the Soviet bloc. Through the magazines, he was discovering a country and a story where socialism had fallen apart a long time ago. The title, Towards an Arab Socialism, no longer meant anything today, just like Should Women Fight means something else when I pronounce it now. If the Black Panther Party had a direct connection to the Algerian struggle and to African movements of decolonization in general, it was pure coincidence that my friend gave me the boxes during the Emory Douglas workshop. He didn't know much about the Black Panther Party, and I didn't know much about the Algerian War of Independence and the history of the non-aligned movement. But strangely, I didn't have the distance he had. I was trying to fit myself into the magazine's definition of woman, or, more likely, into the magazine's headline, a woman who is not a woman, forcing myself into its story, wanting to be the revolutionary, slowly becoming the guardian of that soft dictatorship, pointing my gun at the other covers, wanting to form an armed revolutionary unit and taking over. When your revolution is accomplished, just leave. In reality, I was never courageous enough to become an actor. Although I did many trainings, studied theater, and acted in different films, I never fully committed to acting. It remained a postponed desire. Olga, my grandmother, always said that if she had stayed in Cairo, she would have become an actress. I think it would have been the same for me. But the offer to play Jamila's role made me take the leap, combined with the first actress's decision not to take the part. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure the role would have been hers. I wonder what exact issues she had with the role. Perhaps she thought that war should always be a fight against armed groups or between militaries. In that sense, the Algerian resistance was accused of betraying the revolution by targeting civilians. But in reality, I think she was scared of playing a monstrous role, and heroism and monstrosity often come together. The monster, when it comes to a female role, can be quite disturbing for an actress. Every role you play will affect you, she thought, and decided to turn down Jamila's part. The female monster is malefic. She is different than the male monster, who is physically strong. The female monster may be thin, elegant, and beautiful. The monster is not visible at first glance, but she can suddenly point her weapon at you, become evil, hurtful, and enslaving. With her car, the evil female runs over animals and old people. At home, she drops poison in your food. She loses her humanity. Perhaps the diffident actress saw that monstrous character in the script, the nightmare. Becoming Jamila, the act of shooting.
I remember when they drove us up to the training camps. I had heard about military camps from my older brothers. They served in the French army for a while. But this was different. The comrades trained us. We woke up every day at 4 a.m. and went to sleep at around 12 p.m. At dawn, we and followed orders. Clean, load, hold, 1, 2, 3. It felt good. A way to unleash frustration, to forget humiliation. It went on for 2 weeks. We're becoming quite good at it. Every bullet was a relief and a pleasure I enjoyed intensely. This is something I might get attached to, I remember thinking. They were good teachers, and I, a good student. It was the first time I used the Russian weapon. It was heavy. At the beginning, my shoulders were in pain, and my hands shook with fatigue. I thought I was never going to make it. How will I carry this weapon for nights and days? But gradually, my muscles started building up, and it wasn't long before I felt the machine's lightness. I saw its beauty, and I saw myself with it. The comrades took pictures we often posed for with our guns. We listened to hours of discussion about all kinds of weaponry. The comrades listed gun names, and we listened attentively. We were still beginners. We never intervened in the conversations. We had nothing to say. They talked for hours, discussed speed, pressure, opening, brands, Russian, American. We did have a few theoretical classes about weapons, but very few. Time didn't allow for more. Practice is what you need, they thought. Arms took a long time to reach us. The trip was long as every border was patrolled. It didn't come directly from Russia, but through Egypt. I remember days of hiding without ammunition, with empty machine guns, which you could always use to hit someone in self-defense. I got good at that too. One night, I was guarding the side entrance of the camp with two other sisters and a brother. We were telling each other stories when we hear strange, unfamiliar bark. We were used to the cry of wolves and to the shattering of monkeys. But dogs? No. Dogs wouldn't come here alone. Maybe wild dogs? No, there wasn't such thing around here. I stood up and grabbed my weapon, turned off the small lamp, and slowly climbed up the slope in the direction of the sound. I looked back to see who had followed me. Two of my comrades were behind me. The barking continued. It got closer. Whatever was barking was getting closer. As I advanced, the sound got louder, as if someone was turning the volume up. Then steps. We heard steps. Was someone walking, or were these dog steps? I waved towards my comrades, snapping my fingers, indicating rocks they could hide behind. They approached, slowly, and we all hid behind the rocks, the three of us. I looked at one of the sisters. She seemed a little confused. This was the last thing we expected. The camp was one of our few hiding spots, and was supposedly unreachable. If they had discovered it, then someone from inside the camp must have informed them. A traitor, yes, but who? It is not as if there were never any traitors before in the camp, but who was it this time? I started imagining different scenarios. What if? I whispered in his ear. We couldn't map the distance or identify the location. The sound was getting louder, as if the dogs were running in all directions. Was it one dog or many? No. We could hear a couple. They were yelping at each other, and suddenly, light. And steps. There they were. Someone must have told them about the camp. Yes. We're waiting. We're sweating. We started sweating despite the cold temperature. This was the safest place the fighters could find. Our turf was against all infiltration. But here they were. Voila. I stood up, clenching my gun's grip, and came out from behind the rocks. I decided to face them without fear. I had recently learned how to use my AK, and this was the first time I was confronted by a real situation. But the brother grabs me by the shoulder and pulls me down, asking me to sit. What are you doing? I remove his hand fiercely and walk towards the barking sound. Nothing. I look hysterically for the source of the sound. It was very dark. I couldn't see anything. Suddenly, a monkey jumps at me. I shoot it, hitting a tree instead, which leads an army of dormant monkeys to move frantically from one branch to another before settling on another tree. The dogs, alarmed, keep barking, and I continue running as if pulled magnetically by the sound. I see the comrades running after me. Did we see a light or not? I couldn't remember. Things were getting blurry. We're facing the dogs now. Their strident cry impeded our speech. The comrade asked me to step back. He was shouting. I was transfixed by the multiplicity of sounds. My feet are stuck to the ground. And suddenly, I scream, "Kill the bear!" And silence. We couldn't hear a thing. Not even the insects crawling under our boots. The three dogs were lying on the ground. But that was not it. Perhaps this was a trap. We ran back up, leaving the dogs with blood pouring from their wounds. After that incident, no comrade ever tried to hold me back again. I then realized that we were not only fighting the French, we were also fighting each other. Yes. The comrades had dragged us out of our houses and into the mountains. They drove us up there and trained us. But after a while, I couldn't bear taking their orders. Sit here. But they are your brothers, she said when I confessed my growing resentment. She was shocked when another sister confessed she felt the same. This is when things started going wrong. Had I wished to kill a comrade instead of that bear?
This passage from the script made me realize that pointing the guns at the rest of the cover was a misplaced act. Jamila's wish was to point her gun at her comrades. It is not until she was arrested and tortured that she started being respected and known as a symbol of the revolution. Only then was she given the first role. She could point her gun at the audience, the reader, or the viewer, but in reality, this is what she wished to do. In an interview, Yasif Saadi, one of the main FLN leaders, says that he needed Jamila because she was beautiful and had fair skin. She could trespass the barricades of the European city in order to plant the bomb. She could change clothes, look like a European, and enter any place. The military would let her pass. He was looking for young, beautiful women to recruit. Jamila was the closest to him, as she was already working as a messenger for the fighters. She then brought in many of her friends who joined the revolution. With Jamila, he had casted the bomb girl, and it worked. 60 years later, I was still seduced by his choice. If the change of costume and clothing brings a new character and identity, the uniform certainly liberated the female fighters from their domestic life they were trapped in. For me, a change of costume is the first trigger for a change of character, voice, and attitude. As soon as I put my costume on, I start performing the character. It takes a little while before I totally immerse myself into the role, but I adopt the attitude quite quickly. The military uniform undid a domestic notion of womanhood and ended up creating a new category, the woman guardian of the revolution. Like Gaddafi's bodyguards, the revolutionary nuns, who supposedly dedicated their lives to the revolution with a life free of any sorts of relationships except biological family ties, parents, sisters, brother. They should stay virgins to stress on the idea of the purity of the revolution. This is what the female revolutionaries are asked to do, perform the revolution. In his Green Book, Gaddafi says that the only difference between a man and a woman is menstruation, stressing on gender equality with regards to the state. The only difference is blood. It is this very difference that regulates your status as a citizen, menstrual blood. I know this sounds like a joke, but I met one of his bodyguards, a Lebanese lady. She must be in her 40s now. She was hiding in her village in the south of Lebanon. After being a revolutionary guard for 20 years, she went back to her parents. She told me that she liked the fact that the Green Book stressed gender equality. She always felt like she couldn't conform to her village, and being a revolutionary had been a good way to escape. But if the guardians of nation states have gone back home to their parents, and if there is nothing to guard anymore, you can easily change costume. You can become a civilian, a rebel. You can even become a European and cross the barricades and become a or you can even become a grandfather. I was once a grandfather in one of my jobs as an extra. What is great about being an extra is that you do not speak. Everything happens in silence. You watch, you wait, you follow orders, but you do not utter a word. You remain silent. Gaddafi's bodyguard as well remained silent. Although she had seen students being executed and other mass executions, tortures, and killings, she remained silent. Unlike the bodyguards, the guardians of the revolution are usually brainwashed to repeat the same slogans. Is repeating the same sentence the same as remaining silent? Change costume, become a civilian, a European, and trespass the barricades. So yes, we became revolutionaries. We changed costumes, put on handmade revolutionary costumes, and started training. Clean, load, hold. 1, 2, 3. As you can tell, my hunt to reconstitute Jamila's character took me to different places. And while I started to dig into the different Jamila roles in the history of cinema, a friend told me this surprising story. While he was reading a report on the anti-colonial struggle produced by a party that promotes itself under that slogan, He saw the name of my grandfather as a collaborator with the French mandate. I then realized that the Nasserist magazines, whose covers fascinated me, would never have entered my grandfather's house. Although my grandmother was born and raised in Cairo, her family was definitely affected by the land nationalization. I remember her cursing a million times at Nasser's politics. The question, how to achieve socialism, was her nightmare. When I was retracing Jamila's trip to Cairo, I went to meet Hind, my great aunt, who had given Jamila a tour of the National Museum. I asked the museum employee, "Do you know Hind?" "Who wouldn't?" he answered. "She is one of the museum's monuments. That's her over there." I recognized her. She took me to one side and asked me not to speak in Lebanese too loudly, as we should only speak Egyptian here. I laughed. She was having a hard time teaching French to her staff since they couldn't pronounce the letter P. P doesn't exist in Arabic. They would pronounce it B instead. Particulier, bâtisserie, potentiel, progrès, and progress. She tried correcting their accent and have them pronounce the letter R correctly, but always failed. She consoled herself knowing that even at the French Institute in Cairo, they had given up on this, she said. Their lips couldn't conform to the letter P, and their tongue couldn't let go of the R as to let their throat gurgle to the sound R. Hind was undoubtedly the last monument of a fading colonial culture. It was suddenly clear to me my grandfather was a collaborator and Hind and Jamila the last monuments of a history of revolutionary and counter-revolutionary struggle. They, the colonizers, didn't rob the archaeological sites. They discovered them. You could call it reappropriation, just like how I found Jamila's photos hiding in my friend's grandfather's house. But they were communists, although in Egypt, this didn't mean pro-Nasseris. In Beirut, the magazine spoke to a leftist readership. Jamila, yes, a heroine, my grandfather, a collaborator, and Hind, the last monument. When I Googled Jamila's name and saw this, I started thinking about how she had been reappropriated by the crowds. Cheerful people are waiting for her at the airport with flowers and welcoming signs. She had become an Egyptian popular icon. Did Nasser's government buy the rights to Jamila's heroic image when they supplied the Algerian anti-colonial movement with weapons? Perhaps Youssef Chahine, in Jamila l'Algérienne, doomed Jamila to endlessly repeat her heroic act, planting the bomb in a club, La Bataille d'Alger. Becoming Jamila, the act of planting a bomb. You are in a place, a room filled with people chatting about anything and everything. You have a homemade bomb on you. Whatever happens, you will place the bomb. If you change your mind or have any doubts, don't think you will be able to run away with it. The bomb will explode anyway, so you better place it according to the plan. When you get to the club, you will see a crowd of civilians, people innocently dancing and chatting. Don't think they are innocent. No one is really innocent. Whoever denies oppression is not innocent. They are complicit in that oppression. Don't let your emotions take over. Leave the bomb under the bar as planned. Remember, it is not a fair war, and you are no longer a civilian. You stopped being a civilian when you saw people dying. Later on, when you will be interrogated, you will answer, "I am not a civilian." I was asked to acknowledge that my act was a dark stain in the history of the revolution. Did they expect a white revolution? Is a revolution supposed to be stainless? I wonder. A revolution is not a virgin, but if it stops being a virgin, they start hating it. There is no pure revolution to satisfy your fantasy, my dear. The revolution, it's not a virgin. It is dirty and bloody. Before I decided to play Jamila's role, I was a movie extra. Once, as a grandfather. I was sometimes filmed from behind or sitting at a table. And here, you see me chatting with a guy. I felt like a superfluous audience member that had stayed inside the frame. The set has different audiences, technicians, makeup artists, assistants, scriptwriters, etc. But I was inside the frame watching a scene with a movie star entering a cafe to place a bomb. Yes, that was me. I passively watched her planting the bomb. I just sat there with my back to the camera watching. I knew she was going to do it. I took my bag and left the room without trying to stop her. I couldn't care less. I saved myself and left the club. I didn't care about the remaining movie extras. They could all die. After the explosion, their bodies, or let's just call them extra bodies, were scattered all over the floor. The restaurant was filled with smoke, and the floor was crimson with fresh blood, dark, thick red blood. Following the explosion, there was silence, then cries and panic, screams. I followed the main actress through the streets. We were just a minute walk away from the club when we heard the explosion. I don't know why I had followed her. I didn't know if I was with her or against her, and if I was following her only to denounce her to the police, or had I followed her to join her struggle. I had just left the bar when I saw her planting the bomb, leaving all the extras to die. Here I am, a survivor of the bar explosion. Again, I see myself observing her from a distance, wanting to slip under her skin, becoming her, steal her story. During the entire film, whenever the figure of the collaborator appeared, I thought of my grandfather. I had never met him, he died before I was born, but I certainly had an idea of who he was now. He was the collaborator in that movie. He had collaborated against Jamila. I confess his sin and I apologize. But when I googled Jamila's name again and found a photograph of her with Bashar al-Assad, I laughed. Sorry, Grandpa. Once a heroine, Jamila had become a petrified monument, a guardian of a dictatorship. Me. I will play your role soon. Jamila, don't tell me another one of those movies. I will try to say something new. Say that I died. No, please, don't say that. It's bad luck. Don't do it. It's bad luck for actresses. Magda was only offered whore roles after Jamila Lajelian, and Zulikha never acted in any movie again. I think it will be great. Don't worry. Where do you think it should be set? In the mountains, in the city, or on a moon set with Olga, the astronaut? Huh? I just want to know where we would like it to be set. I am telling you, it's bad luck, and every role you play will affect you. Remember that. When Hind, my favorite Tunisian actor, posted a message on Facebook asking her fans, "What would you like me to play next? Leila Trabelsi, Suzanne Mubarak, or Jamila Bouhairid?" All voted for Jamila. Hind had already played the part of a servant working in a Tunisian palace, where she helped freedom fighters hide from the French, Le Silence des Palais. Her fans wanted her in a heroic role, but have they seen Jamila with Bashar? It doesn't matter. We can keep repeating the story of her heroic act again and again and again. One more time. Change the actress, but keep the same story. Becoming Jamila, the act of speaking. I can't move my hand because of torture inflicted on me. My hand is attached to my breast and it cannot move. I wish it could move like this, but it can't do circular movements. My hand is stuck to my breast. All the extras are sitting on benches facing me and booing. They are asked to jeer. These people, mostly French Algerians, knew someone who died or lost a limb in the attack. It makes them happy to know that I cannot move my hand, the same hand that once held a gun and planted the bomb. It got shot. They think I deserve it. For them, I am a criminal, just like for the actress who refused to play my role. The audience thinks I'm a criminal. The audience hates it when I am on stage. They would like me to be imprisoned and tortured to death like many of my comrades. At the same time, the campaign Free Jamila was launched. It is an international campaign supported by intellectuals and activists from around the world. My audience is outside that courtroom, speaking in front of such a contemptuous audience and being tried as a French citizen. I cannot be tried as a French citizen. I can only be judged as an Algerian citizen. I am a citizen of a future state yet to come. I can't be tried with laws that do not yet exist. I enter the courtroom shouting, "Long live Algeria," the very phrase I am tried for. By uttering those words in the courtroom, I declare the existence of a state to come. Stateless, I am an alien in my own country. If the trial takes place, I'll wait for my lawyer to come from France. I will not accept to be defended by an Algerian lawyer that I consider a collaborator with the regime. In any case, I will not move. My hand is paralyzed and I will not utter a single word before the lawyer arrives. In deciding to do so, I am defying the audience. But who is allowed to speak and who is allowed to be an audience? Her theatrical presence in court was so alluring that the audience was overwhelmed. They booed her, but she also wanted to be booed. For her, their crime was much bigger than hers. Who booed Jamila? The audience in the courtroom and the actress who refused to play the role. If Jamila consented to speak in the courtroom, would her presence be different? Who wrote the laws she will be tried with? How was her trial legitimate if she was the citizen of a future state yet to come? Now, if you had to choose your ideal set for a revolution, what would it be? The forest, the mountain, or the city? If we wanted to find a place where to stage the revolution, where would we do it? On the moon, perhaps. Olga decided to be filmed on the moon. She was chosen for the first role of the role of the first female astronaut. If nation-state building came with astronauts and freedom fighters, then Olga and Jamila were its main cast. They became the symbol of the nation-state, its most significant representatives. When Olga flew to the moon for the first time, she went as a Soviet citizen. She was wearing the uniform of the Soviet team, proudly representing her country. Once they reached outer space and had to spend 1 month performing tests and working inside the space station, she started thinking about what kind of laws governed the moon. She was in a Soviet spaceship while not being on Soviet territory. Who legislated the lunar territory? Her national identity transformed into something whose nature was still foreign to her. But when she saw the Earth from the perspective of the moon, she felt she belonged to it and pitied all its politics. She wanted to save it, to do something for it. She could no longer be a player in the politics that had flown her to the moon. This is when her inner transformation began. She felt she was not a citizen anymore. She was breaking away from the law, citizenship, and belonging. She couldn't even imagine returning to Earth. How would she live that lie again? She felt she had never been that human. Something inside her was set free, and her human feelings were stronger than ever when she saw the Earth from outer space. She became human for the first time since years. Why is that? It depends on where you are standing and if your feet are grounded, if they are up in the air or hanging from a window. Where do you or can you stand, floating or suspended? The outer arches of her feet try to find a small cavity for support while waiting for the rope to pull her back. Me, I will play your role soon. Don't tell me another one of those movies. I will try to say something new. Say that I died. No, please, don't say that. It's bad luck. Don't do it. It's bad luck for actresses. Magda only played whore parts after Jamila l'Algérienne, and Zulikha never acted in any movie after that. I think it will be great, don't worry. Where do you think it should be set? In the mountains, in the city, or on a moon set with Olga the astronaut? Huh? I just want to know, where would you like it to be set? I am telling you, it's bad luck, and every role you play will affect you. Remember that. The audience will love me, they will scorn you. I won't do the trial scene. Who will then? An extra. She will be filmed from behind, and we will only hear her voice. So it is not my trial. It is, but without me. But who is playing me? I told you, the extra. But who is she? A woman? A fighter? Well, yes, in a way. And the audience, I think they will love me. It's my first main role.